After screaming at me to instructing me to take my morning shower, like I said, I would just hug the toilet seat. Nonetheless, those were happy memories. My grandfather was the only father figure that I had in my life. Of course, in 1983, he passed away, and I think that's basically where all my happy memories started going downhill. He was a very highly respected man. He knew everything. I mean, I actually believe that I inherited a bunch of his traits. You know, I'm a handyman. I'm an owner of a business in Big Springs, and I really believe that he instilled those traits into me. Even though I was really young, I used to see him constantly working. You know, and that's something that kind of motivated me, you know, even though I was really young, but he was my dad. And my grandmother, who raised me as well, was also my mom. And like I said, those were the happy memories, and they were a big influence in my life. When I go back and I reflect on my childhood memories, I often question myself where I went wrong. And what was it I did that caused me to be so angry? It wasn't that my upbringing was bad, because I was a happy child. My family was awesome. We were very productive when we got together. We had great family events. You know, we did everything together as a family. But of course, when then reality set in, you know, Grandpa was gone, and I realized I didn't have a dad. And so, excuse me. But you know, I didn't really think about it back then, but it affected me. It affected me, and it made me realize that it's really important to be a part of family. You know, sometimes we all get sidetracked and we do what we have to do to survive and to work, you know, be responsible, productive. But he was the only dad I knew. You know, so. But anyways, I remember, and I'm kind of gonna change the subject here a little bit, so keep in mind that some of these times were, you know, I'm going back and forth. But a few years before my grandpa actually died, my mom smoked. She was a heavy smoker. And she used to have her little cigarette case, and she smoked those big, long cigarettes. And she would put them out and put them on the ashtray. And I would go and I'd just take one or two, and I'd put it in my pocket or whatnot. And so one day we were in the back, me and my cousin, we were out there fixing to light a cigarette up. And as I started to do that, voila, here comes my sister. And she's like, you're smoking, I'm gonna tell on you. And immediately, I guess my criminal thinking kicked in, because I grabbed that cigarette, put it to her mouth, put my fingers over her nose, and she had to breathe. So she smoked. And so I said, you smoke, you can't tell on me now. And so I blackmailed her. Yes, I did. So that's probably where my story actually starts. You know, we all do crazy things when we're children. But you know, I started to reflect and go back and think about, you know, where was it I went wrong? And according to this other website, it's www.drugabuse.gov, research suggests that a person is likely to proceed licit and illicit substances. And I strongly agree. I believe that smoking can be a gateway. Even though it was harmless at that time, it wasn't long after that. I mean, we're talking 8 years of age here, okay? A few years down the line, I'm smoking pot. And not even a year or two after that, I'm popping acid like you would not believe. You know, I had the ability to, well, I didn't have the ability. I had someone really close to mine that would come from out of state, and he'd bring what they call books of acid. Now, if any of y'all know what a book is, that's about 1,000 hits, okay? So we're talking 1 hit, then 5 hits, then 5 days later, I'm taking 10 hits of acid, LSD.
And so I think that's where a lot of my memory's gone. You know, people say, man, you forget a lot. My sons are always saying, Dad, you're very forgetful. I wonder why. I'll tell you what, smoking weed and LSD has definitely contributed to that factor, you know, loss of memory and stuff of that nature. But like I said, you know, I was a very happy child. I can't complain that we didn't do enough family activities and the gatherings, you know, and for you guys that, you know, I see a few Hispanics in here. You know, in Hispanic cultures, we have a tendency to stick together quite a bit, and that's really strong in our family. Eventually, I started getting into music, okay, and that's my next point there is I used to listen to a bunch of music, and it inspired me in ways that I never thought it could. I mean, it took a grip on me, and some of the music that I listened to included bloody, gore, you know, sex, and stuff of that nature. And I eventually got into a cult, a satanic occult to be, what's the word I'm looking for? To be exact. When I got into this occult, they kind of led me to, actually I was picked to be a high priest. Now I didn't like being like everyone else. You know, I've been, you know, I always say this, I'm a leader, I'm not a follower. I've always been a leader. And because of that, I always feel like, you know, I was destined to do more than anybody else. And so when I do something, I do it to the extreme. And as a devil worshiper, I did it to the extreme. Now, I'm not going to incriminate myself here by no means, so I'm not going to share too much information, but I will say this. I was ruthless, I was evil, and the guy you see before you now, you would not even once think about, like, what? You did that? We invented codes. I learned to speak backwards. I mean, literally speak backwards. Me and a select few would be able to give each other a whole story or a whole conversation talking backwards. And that followed me even to this day. People come up to me and ask me stuff in backwards. I'm like, huh? What did you say? And it makes me realize the impact that I had on these kids. I was probably 16, 17 when I learned to speak this particular language, and it's just amazing how kids I didn't even know would come up to me and says, I'm like, what? Where'd you learn that? He said, you don't remember? I met you when I was this little. And so that was telling me that I made a direct impact on these children's lives, and it bothers me, but I know that everybody's accountable for their own responsibilities, you know. So it's kind of one of those things like, okay, it's your fault, you know, but it's not. You know, everybody has the way the Bible says you work out your own salvation. I didn't want to be like Anton LaVey, by no means. If any of y'all have studied the occult, especially in the Satanism world, you'll learn that Anton LaVey wrote various books, you know, the Satanic Bible, the Satanic Ritual, and a few others. But like I said, I had a dad who was now gone up until the age of 12. His life was, when he passed away, it was devastating to hear the pain that he went through and to see him suffer the way he went through what he went through. And me just being a child, I was telling myself, you know, if there is a God, why would you allow this to happen? And so I guess whenever he passed away, the first real emotion kicked in, which was hatred. Yes, I had hatred towards God. I had hatred towards people in general, especially preachers. And they didn't call me the spitting guy for nothing. I mean, I literally used to spit on preachers. Anytime they tried to preach the word, I'd spit on them. I'm like, get away from me. I don't want nothing to do with you. I started skipping school. I was an angry child now. As a teenager, I started drinking, you know, and we're not talking just beer, we're talking alcohol. Heck, we'd go and rob the 7-Eleven. You know, back then it was Mad Dog 2020. If any of y'all ever drink any Mad Dog 2020, you know that That is definitely not something you like to drink, that will make you throw up for days. But that was my thing. We'd walk into a 7-Eleven, we'd get 5, 6, 7, 8 bottles at a time, do about 4 or 5 beer runs that night, and we'd party all night long. When I was 13 years of age, I was placed in a juvenile detention down in Big Springs. I can't remember the exact, it was an annex building there. And during that time that I was there alone, I remember all this emotions of hatred and just, man, come on in. I had all these emotions that were just running through my head, and I was just so angry at the world. But if you could kind of look at, from the age of 9, now I'm 13, I'm already in the juvenile detention. And by the time I was 16, I had already been removed from home and was placed in an actual juvenile detention in Abilene, Texas. And this, I don't know for any of y'all, I learned a while back that that's what they call the 3-step shuffle. Anybody familiar with that term, the 3-step shuffle? First you start skipping school, then you start going to jail, and then it eventually leads to prison. And that's basically where I was headed. And that's why I think it's important that, people hear my story, especially my children. Everybody needs to hear a story, because when you've been there, done that, it's like, you don't want that to happen to your own children. Especially having to go to prison at such a young age. I was sitting in a jail cell at the years, I was 17 years of age. I was tried as an adult for burglary. I did burglaries as a adrenaline rush, an adrenaline, I can't even pronounce the word right now.
Adrenaline.
Y'all know what I'm talking about. And that's what I did. I did it, because it was a rush to me. But I'll tell you what made me stop is one day, one of the victims whose house I had stolen from confronted me. He sat me down and he was tearing up. He's like, how dare you come into my house and steal everything that I worked so hard for? And that left an imprint in my heart, because I never did it again. Although, a few months later, I did get caught, and I was sitting at the Howard County, we used to call it the Howard County Hilton. We make a joke of it now, but back then, they fed us pretty good, I ain't gonna lie. But it was pretty bad, because one of the things that I was sharing with my wife this morning is, and I actually started crying, because you think about, you're in there, you don't, my family was fortunate enough to come visit me, but when you're there alone at night after everybody's gone and it's just you, I'm 17 years of age and I have adults, men, big men, and the fear would hit me, like, man, and then you would, every, I can't remember if it was the 30th or the 31st of every month, they did the TDC chain. And that's when you hear those chains rattling. And you would hear where they would tie the inmates, and you could hear all it. And it's very, very traumatizing, overwhelming, scary. And for me to have to hear that at such a young age, I'm like, man, I'm fixing to go to prison, And so, yeah, I thought, I'm going to just kill myself and get it over with. Ain't nobody going to care. I don't got a dad that cares for me, but I have my family. So deep down under all these layers of cold, anger, resentment, I had a heart. I was a human being, and I think sometimes we get off on believing that, oh, he's just an inmate, throw away the key. But you know what? I can contest for those guys that are in there and say, hey, you know what? We do have a heart. Yes, we've done some pretty evil stuff in our lives, but we all make mistakes. And so I've been fortunate enough to be here today, and so that's a blessing. I got out, well, let me go back just a little bit. I got sentenced, I was 17 years of age, tried as an adult, and I turned 18 inside the county jail. And back then, we were under the presumptive legislation, so they were doing like 26 days per year. So I ended up doing 5 months, 24 days. Got out. I lasted 30 days in the streets and violated again, went right back. And there I am, now I've experienced it, you know, it's like, TDC ain't nothing. But inside my heart, it was like, hey, man, what am I doing here again? And it was just a continuous deal for me for a period of time. Like I said, I did 30 days, I violated, I went back for assault and various misdemeanors. I had like 10 freaking, beer runs. I mean, that was my thing, beer runs. You know, I joke about it now, but in all sincerity, it's nothing to joke about. After I did a year, because back then, like I said, you would do 26 to 28 days per year. So if you got a 6-year sentence, you would only do 5 months, whatever. But when you went violated, then you would go and do 365 days. So I violated, went to San Antonio, got out, stayed out 3-4 months, violated, went back, did another year. And now in between those times, I did 3-4 months in the county, so it was a year plus. After the third violation, they did what they called a revocation. And this is what I felt was wrong with the system, is because all that time I had did out in the street and all the time I did in the county, they took it away. So when I actually got sentenced for a 6-year sentence, and I'd already done like 3.5 years, so technically I should have had 3 years left, right? You would think. I don't know. The state of Texas had a little loophole in their system where they would take all that time away and then they would add it back and you start all over. So I basically did 10 years on a 6-year sentence, if that makes sense. But yeah, it was pretty crazy. It was crazy. So anyways, I did, and this time I went back and I did 2 years, 2 months, 4 days. After doing this time, I got out. I stayed out quite a bit. I'd say a year or two, somewhere around there. But I had completed parole. Man, I was so happy. I'd been on parole all these years. And I finally finished parole, right? That didn't last 2 years. Within a 1.5 years, 2 years, I caught a new charge. And I still remember all my TDC numbers and my federal numbers, because that's one thing you will never forget. That number becomes a part of your life, whether they tell you to go take a shower, whether they tell you to go eat, whatever. That becomes a part of you forever, and you'll never forget it. And you know, it kind of sucks, you know, because sometimes I'll have dreams, and it takes, you know, whether it's a prison dream or whatnot. And while I was incarcerated, I became affiliated with gangs. And back in the 80s, we were limited to, I believe, 27 prisons. Okay, so there wasn't very many prisons. Well, after I think 2000, that became a big economy, a boom, and they were just building prisons left and right, left and right. And so they were just, you know, they had all kinds of protection. But back then, when I was going through prison, there wasn't that much protection. I mean, you'd go down there, man, and you know, some bad things would happen. And because I was always a leader and not a follower, I was chosen to be a representative for a gang. And so now my head got even bigger, you know, because I'm like, okay, I can cause 200 inmates to go to war with this gang. But I wasn't the type that just went and jumped the gun, whether it was a racial riot or whatnot. I would investigate it thoroughly, you know, with the education that, you know, God gave me through my incarcerations. That's another thing I failed to mention is many years people would say, oh, you're just another dumb Mexican. And that was instilled in me. So what did I do? I didn't just waste my time away in the penitentiary. I utilized my time and I got educated. You know, I got out, one of the times that I got out, I went and got my GED. Then once I got my GED, and when I went back to prison, I got like 1,200 hours, vocational hours for business computer applications. Then I went and pursued another deal for building construction. I got 360 hours there. Then I went to Howard College and got my HVAC certification. So, I mean, it's not like I wasted it. Like a lot of people, they'll just go and they'll just do their time and they don't care. And those are the people that I used to go and confront and talk to and try to, especially the younger generation, because after doing that much time and you know, and people start calling you old school, they come to you for wisdom. You know, they come to you to ask you questions like, well, if I do this, you know, is this going to happen? And here's something that, I don't know if you ever heard this, but when you go and actually sit down for a meal and you eat, when you're done, you have to excuse yourself. I had seen so many fights and riots behind people getting up without excusing themselves by knocking on the table. Now, how crazy is that, right? But it's a whole different ballgame in the penitentiary. And so anyways, how much do I got? Like 45 minutes?
3:50.
30 minutes? Okay, 3:50. Okay, so anyways, in 2005, I'm now 34 years of age. I've been a habitual criminal for over 20 years. I already said that the younger prisoners, they call me old school, but underneath all the criminal mischief and the wrongdoings, I still wanted a normal life. One of the things that I would often think about was my children. And so many times I would sit there and get the pictures and look from the times they were babies until, you know, the present. I'm like, wow, you know, all this time I wasted. And sometimes I wonder why I'm so hard on them, right? But it's not that I do have a heart, and I am human, and I did make a lot of mistakes. But it's only by the grace of God and by my family's prayers and positive role models in my life that I got, you know, a second chance. It's hard to be a Christian in the devil system, you know. It really is. And so I'm going to pass out something here. This is something that happened to me, if you don't mind passing it. This was kind of one of my breaking points. And that's me when I got jumped by my former gang, and they pretty much left me to die. I remember when I got jumped, somehow miraculously I made it into the vehicle I was driving, drove home, and I crawled up to the first step. And when I got to that first step, I woke up at the hospital. And I do remember there was like 6 guys that jumped me. At that time, you know, I was still doing my thing, you know, even though I'd already experienced the prison system and experienced Christianity or whatnot, you know, I still had that temptation to continue to drink and party or whatnot. But I think it was that time that I looked at my grandma's eyes, I call my mom, and I seen that pain that I gave her, and I'm like, why do I keep doing this to them? Why do I keep doing this to myself, to my children? Why? So I realized that this is something I didn't want to continue to do, because I was either going to end up dead or back in prison for the rest of my life. And so it's just an honor to be here today and share my story. You know, I'm up for questions. I don't think I followed my guideline very good, but overall, I think that a life-changing rude awakening. Wait a minute here. I need my glasses.
He forgot his glasses.
My dream, I had my glasses on. I actually had a dream about this years ago, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity, because it's a God thing. I really believe that. Yeah, I said everything. Just to sum it up, I just want to say ultimately that it was God who never gave up on me and my family. I do run a business now. My aunt, my wife, my whole family have been very supportive. Dora actually donated my first stickers and cards, and you know, for a long time I felt like, you know, nobody thinks I'm ever going to make it. But the encouragement from those who love you the most is what made me press on, made me realize, you know what, I do have a life. I do have the opportunity to go out there and share my story, because, like I said earlier, if I could just save one person, or just, you know, plant that seed that needs to be planted so that they can sprout and just, you know, whatever it is God has for you, you know, that's what I felt. And it's just amazing that God works the way that He does, and I will give Him all the honor and glory, because if it wasn't for Him, I would probably be dead. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, guys. state prisons, PDC, and about 6, 7 federal prisons. Now, mind you, during this time, some things I kind of left out was one of the big devastations that I had was from the time that I went from state. Because when I got out, remember I said I was out, and I completed parole, violating, caught a new case. Well, when I caught that new case, I caught a federal case, and I had a cousin who was very dear to me. His name was Philip, and everybody was happy because I was coming home in a prison, needless to say. But nonetheless, I was going to get, because out of all those years, I really didn't get very many visits. Because I mean, when I thought about it, it wasn't good. Mom and them didn't have the money to come see me. It was just, it was hard, because money was tight. I couldn't be that selfish that I'm like, oh, well, how come y'all don't come visit me? Or why don't y'all send me, commissary money? I mean, I learned to hustle. I mean, I did drawings, poetry, you name it, I did it, with the exception of washing underwears for other men. I did have, my hustle, and God really blessed me with that ability to be able to do something that was not illegal. Well, it was kind of breaking the rules in TC, but to answer your question, I've been through a lot of prisons. I got cancer while I was out in the streets, and I was diagnosed with renal cancer, and that was another devastation. As I went, gosh, I don't even know how far Charlotte, North Carolina is from here, but I was all the way over there going through this ordeal in my life. And here's what's funny about it. Okay, we say God, Romans 8:28 says everything happens to the good of those who love God according to His will. When I was out in the streets and they diagnosed me with cancer, I didn't have no money. Okay, but get this. My lawyer who represented me, who happened to be, what do you call it, babe, whenever they do free representation?
Pro bono?
Pro bono, okay. And his retaining fee was $8,000. But he was defending me. While I went to see the judge, Judge Samuel Cummings, we were all like, oh, they're gonna let you out, bro. You got cancer, man. They're gonna let you out. You're gonna get another chance in society, right? Nombre. When I got in front of that judge, they told me, he said, you know what? I hereby sentence you to the best cancer center in the United States of America. Boom! And sure enough, they sent me to North Carolina. Butner, North Carolina. And did you know that the people that worked on me, one of the doctors that I dealt with invented, and I don't know what part, something in the pacemaker. These were guys, very, very talented doctors who was giving their time to help inmates. And it was pretty touching because once I went and thought about it, I'm like, well, God, why would you send me so far away? Dude, you just got a free procedure done with absolutely no cost, and you gotta go back. You say, oh, well, the government paid for it. Yeah, you can debate that, but I know in my heart of hearts that was a God thing. But anyways.
What years were you in? Can you recall?
Yeah, I believe,
County?
that's been, well, I started here at Howard, Big Spring, which is Howard County. When I was 17, I believe that was in 88, maybe? And then from 88 up until, 2002? So that's however many years. Now, mind you, I always tell people 13 and a half years, but it's around that number. I'm not really too sure as far as, I've never actually sat and counted all the months and time, but yeah, it's a pretty long time.
I got a question for you. You mentioned God.
Yes, sir.
But when I have a chance to talk, like I'm doing now, to talk with somebody who's done time and really turned their life around, did you run into anybody, you mentioned God now, but anybody, a correctional officer, a chaplain, a probation officer, a parole officer, any people like that who made a difference, who maybe brought God to you?
Yes, Sammy Segundo. I don't know if you guys have heard of Sammy Segundo. He's from Big Springs, and he's the one I called the chasing preacher. Now, let me back up here. I haven't even started my book, but on one of those chapters, I have the title, The Chasing Preacher. This dude chased me all over Big Springs in the wee hours of the morning. I've probably been high 2 or 3 days in a row, and it's just so this dude happened to find me everywhere I went. And one particular day, we had a flat tire, and we were high as a kite. You know, none of us wanted to get out of the car. They're like, what if the cop sees us? Changing the tire, right? In broad daylight, we've been up for a week. Yeah, man. And so as we're contemplating who is going to change the tire, here comes old Sammy, who now happens to be a very well-known preacher and has got multiple networks all over the world. Well, yeah, all over the world. We just discussed this not too long ago. But this guy he's the one guy that came to my prison cell, or not my prison cell, my jail cell, and was ministering to me. And he brought the gospel to me. Now, that being said, Grandma, my aunts, all of them were all praying for me. And you know, it's kind of like you could feel it. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know that you have a praying family, but Sammy, on the other hand, he's the one that used to go and make that extra effort, and he planted that seed in me, and that's one of the guys that I mentioned a lot to a lot of people when they ask me that question, because that's not the first time they've asked me that. But yes, Sammy Segundo.
If, you know, correct me if I'm wrong here, John, but one thing I like to tell people in these classes, many of whom, most of them are criminology majors and who are gonna wind up working in the system someplace. I still miss it to this day. And one of the reasons, because I was out there for a long time, including Mecklenburg County for a while, that you know, every day you have a chance to be a positive influence in the life of somebody like John, and maybe will change. You may never know it, but that opportunity is always there.
I could share with you just a really brief story. When I was at the Gore unit in Huntsville, Texas. I hadn't been there a couple of weeks, but it just so happened that my jail cell was 316. Many of y'all are familiar with John 3:16. You know, it says, "For God so loved the world, He gave His only begotten Son," etc. So every day I would walk to my cell and I would see that number, right? There was an officer, a correctional officer, who was a really mean-hearted guy, and he just gave everybody in that wing a bunch of, brought a bunch of misery. But then there was another guy that worked his shift afterwards, and me and a group of guys, we start singing. Now get this, never before in the history of Huntsville has this ever been done, but me and this Hispanic guy, we would sing alabanzas, Spanish praise songs in Spanish, and we would do little hymns, English as well. We had that whole week, and there's, I believe, 2 times 30 is what? What is it, 40?
60.
No, 60. I went dumbfounded. So 60 times 3 is 180. Yeah, 180 inmates, right? And I'm not saying every single one of them were, but this guy came to me crying, because he did minister to me every once in a while, and he would give me words of encouragement. He said, "Hey, everything's gonna be all right." He passed by, they would get cups and they would hit against the bars, to just irritate people. If you were sound asleep, I was a deep sleeper. I wouldn't let that bother me. I'd sleep under a little chair like that in about 200 inmates, and I'd snooze away. But he was very encouraging. But one thing that happened that particular night is when we started singing, you couldn't hear nothing, but everybody started singing. And that's one thing that impacted me as well. And I knew that, okay, this is my calling. This is where God wants me to do, because if I could impact not one, not two, but a whole freaking wing, I said, what more could I do? I mean, there's just no limit to what can happen. And anyways, like 3 days later, they removed that guy that was mean-hearted, got removed, he got fired. So I was okay, praise God, But yeah, that's something that's pretty strong there.
Anybody else? Must be some questions out there.
There gotta be some questions out there. Come on, let me have it.
Even if it's a dumb question.
Yes. The only dumb questions are the ones never asked.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Anybody?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned whenever you were in jail and, you know, you heard the chains and stuff. How did you handle that transition from just, you know, being in jail to going to an actual prison?
Really, it was all mostly just, you know how it is, you're incarcerated with a bunch of men, you know, you can't show weakness. It really wasn't one. I mean, it was just, I mean, I was scared. I mean, I was so scared, man, that, you know, had I not been around a bunch of other men, I'd probably peed on myself. I mean, that's to me, that's how devastating it was. To actually hear those chains moving, and rattling, and knowing that one day you're actually gonna go into that bus. Now, mind you, at that time, they don't have air conditioners in those buses, so you're literally a sardine, and they would drive you from Big Springs. It took us about 5 hours to get to Huntsville. And it was, you know, it was bad. It was almost inhumane, but by the time you get to the diagnostics unit, you know, it's like you literally don't have no time to think. You're like constantly waking you up at 3:30 in the morning, go eat chow at 4:15. Once you get back from your chow hall, then you gotta, you know, take care of your personal, whatever it is you're gonna do, and then within 30 minutes, they call you out for work. I mean, not for work, to get your diagnostics going. They take you through all these classes. Man, it's just nonstop for like a month. You go through all these different deals. It's mostly at night when you start thinking about, man, am I really here? And then that's where the fear really kicks in, because you don't know where they're going to send you. Depending on what we call our rap sheet, that's how they go based upon where they're going to send you. Whether back then they were called rock and roll units, which I got sent to maximum security prison at Ferguson in Midway, Texas. And there was like deaths there, like at least once a month there was a killing. People thrown off the third floors, you know, just so many things that you just really don't have time to think about. But when you do, you know, I ain't gonna lie, I cried at night by myself. You know, I wouldn't show it to anyone else because, of course, you know, it's a man thing and you can't show signs of weakness. And someone's always gonna test you. If you think you're bad, there's always gonna be someone better. Always. I hope that answers your question, because I really never had time to think of my transition of how I was gonna go or whatnot.
You joined a gang for protection?
No, actually, I'll be a little bit elaborate on this. It is a gang, okay? But when I was manipulated to believing that it wasn't a gang, and what it was, and I'm not ashamed to say it, but it was called West Texas, which is the acronym for West Texas Tango, TANGO, means Towns Against Notorious Gang Organizations. So we actually, and I was one of the spokesmen that would actually come to you and say, hey, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Big Springs, or I'm from Midland, Odessa, San Angelo, all these surrounding cities. And you say, well, come here, homeboy. You know, you're over here with us. And then you start talking to them. And then you say, hey, look, check it out. I'll pull out a pocket or a matchbox full of weed. And you say, hey, look, man, I'll hook you up with this, man. All you got to do is what they call a quota check. Quota check, they go and they test you. Normally, the way I would do is 3-on-1, what we call smash. You get jumped, and then once you get jumped, then you earn your respect, and then I give you a matchbox worth about $100 worth of weed. You roll it up, whatever you're gonna do with it, but at the end of the week, you have to pay up. If you don't, then you get what they call a green light on you, and that means anyone in our gang can smash you anywhere you're at, any place, anytime. And it doesn't matter where, and you know, people actually get free will cases now, and some people get murdered behind that. It's really scary, but yes, I was affiliated.
How'd you get the weed?
Guards, most guards, you know, just depends, but to answer your question, most of them were guards. Yes, sir.
I've seen people throw stuff over the fences as well.
Oh, yeah.
I used to work in a prison. That's not how I met him, but I did meet him in church, but I have worked in a prison, yes, as a nurse, and I would see people actually throw stuff over the fences, or visitors who would come out into the yard. They would just drop it, try to drop it nonchalantly by trees and stuff like that, and you knew that that's how prisoners got their stuff.
Yep.
Where were you a nurse?
I've been a nurse in Big Spring for over 25 years.
At the institution?
No, at the institution there, I was a nurse for a year and a half, almost 2 years. And then I've worked at the hospital and all over since then. It was a good learning experience, so I can tell you that. He won't let me go back.
We didn't know each other during this time, you know, I mean, I met her like what?
2011.
No, I'm talking about when I met you way
Oh,
back.
yeah,
I met her
years
in
ago when
California.
we were
in
teenagers.
California. I was 16 years old, I think. Took off to Cali and met her, and God brought us together. 30
And he was not a man I would have married years ago, let me tell you. No, he was not, and I'll just be honest with you. It was definitely the old man and the new man. There's definitely a new man.
There's a difference.
There's a big difference whenever you see somebody's lives changed.
Doesn't happen that often, but when it does happen, it's really.
Well, and you have to believe in people. You know, when I worked at the prison, one of the biggest things was I would get upset when the guards were mean to the inmates, because they treated them as less than. You know.
And one thing we would tell each other as inmates, if any of you guys ever get a job being a PO or a correction officer, whatever, you know, you make the inmate. You know, and that's through respect, because they are humans. You know, a lot of people always, man, I don't know how many times they put us down. Say, oh, he's just an inmate, throw away the key. But you know what? Overall and in all, if you are a butt, you're gonna get the same measure applied to you. And a lot of those guys don't ever make it. They'll either get killed or they get put on the perimeter where they drive a truck all day. But that is the truth.
John, you know, and I might have shared this with some of you anyway, but on 5 or 6 previous occasions, I've had a chance to ask somebody the same question I asked you about. Did you run into somebody? Did somebody make a difference? And I have yet to hear one of those inmates that I've talked to mention one of these highly paid psychiatrists or anybody like that. They invariably mention a correctional officer. And invariably what the person did was do nothing but listen.
Right.
And somehow made the person think that, hey, I'm not a piece of garbage.
Right.
Because Officer Franco here
Listen.
took the time to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And
You're right.
it's always struck.
I've had various counselings. I mean, you know, whether it was a pastor or, and mostly it was an inmate. You know, an inmate would listen to me and we'd share similar experiences, and you know, there was always a support group. But one of the things that I can honestly say, you know, is I have a family, a great family that is just, I mean, you know, Dora brought me here. I was like, what? No. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I just get myself into? And I was like, okay. And I give God the glory for that, because this was actually a dream I had a long time ago. But I had straight gray hair and glasses. And I asked my wife, did I not bring my glasses? But it's just an honor and a privilege to be here with you guys. I thank you so very much. Glad you didn't cry with me.
Any other family have anything to say at all?
Yeah, we're just very proud of him.
Yeah.
He's come a long way.
He has come
A long, long way. We never give up on him.
And you're welcome here anytime, and I may be calling you again.
That's fine. If I ever write my book and finish it, y'all remember John J. Flores, because hopefully one day I will get it done, and I would be more than happy to sign my autograph on it.
Thank you, John.
He started about 10 times and hasn't finished it.